I think that generally I'm pretty fair to Christianity, but again and again I encounter a few things in many Christians, a few beliefs, arguments that I just can't get by, that just keep reinforcing my kind of Nietzschean ideas about Christianity. And one of these things is the very ill-concealed disdain which a lot of them have for their ancestors. Like on videos, I get comments all the time, the pagans were degenerate, they were immoral, they were brutes, they were uncivilized. And it's like, you're talking about your own ancestors here, right? You're talking about the origins of your own civilization. These are the people who gave you your civilization, who gave you your genetics, who gave you your language, who gave you basically everything. That's kind of the highest sin in the pagan worldview, to blaspheme your own ancestors, to look down on them rather than worship them and hold them in high esteem. And this kind of despise or disdain for European heritage seems very easy to trigger in them because, again, I'm making videos which most Christians should probably agree with 99%, but then I talk a bit about, the greatness of the ancient Greeks and so on, and then suddenly I get all these comments, they were degenerate, they were evil. And then, of course, these arguments which they make aren't at all true. If you read through European literature, they clearly had morality, they had a moral system. A lot of the virtues which trad Christians think are Christian are actually pagan virtues. They had virtue, they had ideas of generosity and mercy, they had ideas of romance, they had ideas of monogamy. Again, they emphasized the family, courage, heroism, chivalry. These things are all rooted in the pagan tradition, in the European tradition, not in the Hebrew tradition. And of course, the Greeks had a very advanced civilization. They had great literature. The Romans had one of the most powerful, advanced civilizations which history has seen, especially, for its time, for the technology of the time. The Icelandic sagas are a beautiful treasure house of literature. Christianity by no means brought morality or civilization to Europe. In fact, Christianity came into Europe during a dark age, during the decline of classical civilization. And I'm not going to go so far as to say that Christianity caused this dark age, but it certainly didn't bring any type of moral enlightenment or an age of scientific progress or anything like that. Christianity came during a time when civilization, science, literature, all these things, culture were actually declining. So it's a very poorly thought out argument. And even the idea that the gods were these immoral, violent creatures, yes, to some degree, they were immoral, violent, chaotic, right? They represent, again, forces of nature rather than moral actors. But if you read through the Homeric hymns, for example, a lot of this stuff could sound almost Christian, Hail Lord Apollo, blessed gift for all of us, shining one, these sorts of things, right? The ancient Greeks were not worshipping Baphomet or something like this, right? And then we come to the question of morality. A lot of Christians, again, will say that Christian morality is the only thing keeping us from being barbaric. Nietzsche just wants us to all dominate each other in this brutal, animalistic way, which of course isn't at all true. What Nietzsche is getting at, again, is first principles. Is the world fundamentally moral, or do we create moral systems? Do we create morality? Nietzsche is not denying that moral systems exist. He says man is the animal which values. He believes that value systems are integral to the human being, and that's why he talks about them. That's why he talks about master and slave morality. But he's trying to get at what the first principle is, and he of course believes it is biological life. He starts from a position of affirming biological life, and he believes that master morality is the natural system which affirms and celebrates biological life, which enriches and intensifies and protects biological life, because more generally in the universe, entropy is always at play, and biological life is a force which is resisting entropy. So he believes that mass morality encourages biological life. In contrast, he thinks slave morality is maladaptive. It restricts life and makes it sick. But Nietzsche is not at all saying we should have no morality. He's just investigating our moral systems. For example, the narrative, again, that Christianity brought morality to Europe. Is that really true? No, it doesn't seem to actually be true. Well, could this be just a way of making ourselves feel good, of making ourselves feel justified, of making ourselves feel superior? Perhaps. People will say, oh, we are bringing democracy and liberal values to the Middle East. Is that really true, or is that just a moral narrative which we tell ourselves to justify conquest? And then we can look at this on an individual level as well. The nihilistic atheist still for some reason seems to believe in some form of morality, and they actually seem to be neurotically obsessed with morality, with being a good person, with quote-unquote virtue signaling and all these things. And so then we can say, well, perhaps this is just, again, a narrative to make them feel good about themselves, to kind of justify their own existence and their superiority. And could it be the same for the Christian? I don't know. But this is not equivalent to saying that there should be no morality or that we should be pitiless. In fact, Nietzsche does buy into a moral system. He buys into a value system, rather, and specifically the European pagan one. And I think this is overlooked a lot when people speak about Nietzsche. He talks about himself as a disciple of Dionysus. In Will to Power, he explicitly calls himself and the followers of his philosophy pagans. He says, we pagans in faith. And in Will to Power, he contrasts the healthy pagan man to the sickly nihilistic Christian man. He talks a lot about paganism and the pagan spirit. In Twilight of the Idols, he talks about Dionysus, the Dionysian mysteries, the secret of the Dionysian mysteries. And I'm actually going to read a quote from Twilight of the Idols, which I've read many times, but it's a very important quote for understanding Nietzsche. Quote, for it is only in the Dionysian mysteries, in the psychology of the Dionysian state, that the fundamental fact of the Hellenic instinct, its will to life, is expressed. What did the Hellene gain for himself with these mysteries? Eternal life, the eternal recurrence of life, the future promised and hallowed in the past, the triumphant yes to life despite death and change, real life conceived as the collective prolongation of life through procreation, through the mysteries of sexuality, end quote. Again, the collective prolongation of life through procreation, right? This idea of life as a intergenerational chain. And that idea is what Nietzsche's Übermensch is based upon, that life is passed down. It is this force which is passed down each generation, and it is something which can be intensified. All these qualities of life can be encouraged. Someone can be beautiful in different degrees. Someone can be vital, energetic in different degrees. And beauty, vitality, strength are all expressions of life. They're all markers of life in abundance, right? Just as lethargy and illness and weakness and frailty, etc., are symptoms of sickly life, right? Life which is dying, life which is being broken down by entropy, by the natural state of things. And life, this thing which is life, which Nietzsche calls the will to power, is fundamentally opposing these forces of entropy. And the goodness of this thing which we call life, is Nietzsche's first principle. And that's why he buys into this European pagan value system. He believes it understands and celebrates life as it is, seeks to encourage it. And of course, his idea of the Übermensch was doubtless inspired by the idea of the demigod, right? This overman, this superman. The demigod is, faster, stronger, more beautiful than the average mortal. And in the Indo-European worldview, everything again is conceived of as a hierarchy with the gods on top. They are immortal, they are undying, they are filled with power, with beauty, with vitality. They are like pure life. And then beneath them you have kind of the demigods, who are actually, related kind of almost biologically to the gods, right? And you have aristocratic families who descend from these demigods, who again are the aristos, meaning the noble, the excellent, the beautiful, and so on. And then you have this whole hierarchy descending all the way down to the base, the plebeian, the ugly, the wicked, the ignoble. And it is upon this that their ideas of good and bad, or good and evil, are based. Good is all of the markers of life in excess, healthy, flourishing life, and bad is a lack of these qualities. But this doesn't mean that morality doesn't exist within this worldview. Of course, there was morality. Things again like honor and devotion to your family, brotherhood, codes of conduct, and proper manner and etiquette, etc. were extremely important. They had morality. It's just a question of the fundamental worldview in which this morality exists. The worldview of the ancient Greeks wasn't this kind of purely physicalist worldview. Beauty is good, but beauty is linked to virtue, right? Strength is good, but strength is linked to virtue. Beauty and goodness are inextricably linked, and again, this worldview carried over into some forms of Christianity. You can see this worldview in Chrétien's romances, as I've talked about in a different podcast episode. And fundamentally, I believe this to be true. I mean, beauty is good, right? You would never wish for someone to be ugly. When we see beauty, we know that it is good, because we sense that it is a marker of healthy, flourishing life. We sense excellence where there is beauty. We see order where there is beauty. We see symmetry. We see dynamism, energy, vitality. I think this is the worldview which is natural to the Western mind. In beauty, we see goodness. In excellence, we see goodness. In old age and death, we see wickedness. And I believe all those who come to my channel share this worldview. We are not alienated by modernity because of its immorality, but because of its ugliness. And what we seek to revive in the West is not any specific moral system, but rather beauty, excellence, and all the virtues which breed them.
This video is an excerpt from the ARC's exclusive podcast. For the full 30-minute episode and access to a private Telegram community, check the links in the description. Thank you for your support. It makes this channel possible.